Welcome back to the channel, history enthusiasts. Today, we re-diving deep into one of the most explosive and transformative events in the history of the Byzantine Empire. The Nika Riots of 530 CE. These riots were a crucial turning point in the reign of Emperor Justinian I, shaking the very foundations of his rule and nearly toppling his empire. Spanning a mere week, the Nika Riots are a fascinating example of civil unrest, political maneuvering, and the fragile nature of imperial power. So, let's peel back the layers and explore the causes, events, and legacy of this dramatic episode in Byzantine history. Before we dive into the riots themselves, it's important to understand the broader context of the Byzantine Empire in the 6th century. Under Emperor Justinian I, the Byzantine Empire reached the height of its territorial expansion, recovering large portions of the western Mediterranean, including North Africa and Italy. Justinian's ambitious goals included the restoration of the Roman Empire, codification of Roman law through the Corpus Juris Civilis, and the construction of monumental architecture like Hagia Sophia. However, Justinian's reign was also marked by significant challenges. Despite his military successes and legal reforms, he faced constant internal dissent, political intrigue, and economic difficulties. The population of Constantinople, his capital and the heart of the empire, was deeply divided, and social unrest was always bubbling beneath the surface. To understand the Nika Riots, we need to explore the deep social and political tensions that existed in Constantinople. One of the most significant sources of unrest was the chariot races at the Hippodrome, the massive stadium in the center of the city where the Byzantine elite and commoners alike gathered to watch the races. These races were not just a form of entertainment, they were a focal point of political and social life, with factions forming around different chariot teams. The two most powerful factions were the Blues and the Greens, named after the colors of the teams they supported. These factions, which were ostensibly focused on the races, often functioned as social and political groups that held considerable sway in the city. They were more than just sports fans, they were loyal to different factions of the government and had strong political influence. They became a source of power, capable of influencing the emperor's policies and even instigating violence. The factions were also aligned with different segments of society. The Greens were generally supported by the lower classes, and they had a reputation for favoring more populist policies. The Blues, on the other hand, attracted the support of wealthier, more aristocratic members of society. While their rivalry was often centered around the races, it also became a proxy for broader political and social divisions within the empire. So, how did these tensions explode into the Nika Riots? The immediate trigger occurred during the chariot races on January 13, 530 CE, when both the Blues and Greens united for once revolted against the policies of Emperor Justinian. A key issue that fueled the unrest was the emperor's heavy-handed approach to law and order. Justinian's administration had been cracking down on corruption and crime in the city and, in doing so, had alienated many of the common people. The tipping point came when several members of the Greens and Blues were arrested and sentenced to death after a previous riot. Their executions were seen as unjust, and both factions demanded their release. When the emperor refused to pardon the prisoners, the Blues and Greens united in outrage. The unrest quickly escalated from a protest to full-blown violence. The factions initially seeking justice for their supporters began to attack government buildings, riot in the streets, and call for the overthrow of Justinian himself. The chants of Nika, meaning victory, echoed through the city, signaling their intent to overthrow the emperor. The Nika Riots began to unfold rapidly. Thousands of people filled the streets of Constantinople, burning buildings, looting, and attacking officials. The Hippodrome became a center of rebellion, and the rioters demanded that Justinian be overthrown, placing their hopes on a new emperor. At one point, the rioters even declared a rival emperor, Hypatius, a nephew of the former emperor Anastasius I, who was a member of the imperial family. With Hypatia's support, the crowds grew larger and more vocal, creating a real threat to Justinian's throne. For several days, the riots raged across Constantinople. The imperial palace and key government buildings were set ablaze, including the Hagia Sophia, which was partially destroyed during the fighting. Justinian was faced with the prospect of losing control of his empire. Justinian was initially paralyzed by the violence, but he was not without allies. His wife, Empress Theodora, played a pivotal role in the emperor's decision-making during the crisis. Theodora, known for her intelligence and political acumen, famously urged Justinian to stand firm rather than flee. Her famous words, "Royal purple is the noble's shroud," signified her belief that they should fight to the bitter end. With Theodora's support, Justinian made a crucial decision. He turned to his trusted general, Belisarius, and the imperial army to quell the rebellion. Rather than negotiating with the rioters, Justinian decided on a brutal crackdown. On January 18, 532, Belisarius and his troops stormed the Hippodrome. In a bloody and decisive action, the imperial forces slaughtered thousands of rioters. Estimates of the death toll vary, but it is believed that up to 30,000 people were killed in the suppression of the Nika Riots. The rebels were ruthlessly put down, and Hypatius was arrested and executed. The aftermath of the Nika Riots was profound. Despite the bloodshed, Justinian's reign was ultimately strengthened by his victory over the rebels. The suppression of the riots solidified his control over the empire, and he was able to reassert authority. In the wake of the destruction, Justinian embarked on an ambitious rebuilding campaign, restoring much of Constantinople, including the full reconstruction of the Hagia Sophia. However, the Nika riots exposed significant vulnerabilities in Justinian's rule. The violence demonstrated the depth of dissatisfaction within the urban populace and the power of the factions at the Hippodrome. The emperor had relied on his military might to preserve his rule, but the incident highlighted the dangers of alienating the common people. The Nika riots were a pivotal moment in Byzantine history. While they did not overthrow Justinian, they exposed the fragility of imperial power and the deep political divisions within the empire. The revolt demonstrated that the emperor's authority could be threatened by internal unrest, even from groups that, on the surface, seemed harmless like the chariot racing factions. The riots also foreshadowed the increasingly volatile relationship between the Byzantine emperors and their urban populations. Later in history, similar uprisings would erupt, and the memory of the Nika riots would remain a cautionary tale about the dangers of ignoring public sentiment. The Nika riots of 530 CE are a stark reminder of how fragile political stability can be, even in an empire as powerful as the Byzantine Empire. What started as a sports-related protest quickly spiraled into one of the most dangerous uprisings in the empire's history. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think the Nika riots tell us about power, rebellion, and the role of public opinion in politics?